Hey everybody, welcome back to Your Full Tilt. I'm Dawn Zoldi, your host, and we have with us today an incredible guest, Dr. Jamey Jacob. He is the director of Oklahoma State University. This is a mouthful, bear with me. Oklahoma State University's Unmanned Systems Research Institute. And Dr. Jacob is going to speak to us today from his theme of how leaders create opportunities. So welcome to the show, Jamey. Great to have you.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And we're going to talk about OSU and your research center. But before we do, can we get a little bit of background on you?
Sure, yeah. So I'm a native Oklahoman. I have a bachelor's degree in aerospace engineering and a master's and PhD in mechanical engineering. I spent 10 years at the University of Kentucky as assistant professor in their School of Mechanical Engineering before I moved here to Oklahoma State University to join their aerospace engineering program.
Well, I'm excited to dig into your program to be sure. But before we do that, I want to kind of step back. You selected a really interesting theme, how leaders basically create opportunities. What does that mean to you? Like, basically, why did you pick that theme?
Well, for me, we have students come in, and, being a professor, you're in a really interesting situation because your audience is one that is choosing to be there. Your customer, right? They want to be there. They're seeking out that degree in that specific area that you're teaching. So they're looking for opportunities to really further their career. So you're not necessarily trying to find something that they may not be interested in. They should already be passionate about it to some degree. But my real interest is providing unique opportunities to provide them perspectives and experiences that they may not otherwise get. And whether that's in the classroom, in the laboratory, or extracurricular, outside in the field, is try to come up with really unique things that get them not only excited and passionate about their career, but open up their mind and their eyes to things that they may not have otherwise seen. And so that's, I really kind of take that from my experience as an undergraduate, where I started working on an extracurricular project called the Tornado Chaser way back in the 80s. And the idea behind that was to develop a UAV that would chase not necessarily into tornadoes, but around tornadoes to get really vital data to help meteorologists better predict that. That was an idea ahead of its time. It didn't really go anywhere, but 20 years later, I found myself working on that same project. And it was because of
Wow.
that unique opportunity that I had then.
Yeah, so I love that. And clearly, you're a great professor. I can already tell how passionate you are about what you do. It just really, honestly, it just kind of shines through. And having been a professor myself, obviously a student much of my life, professors make such a difference in people's lives and inspiring people to want to continue on. And they can also sadly have the opposite effect. I know that's not you. But before we get into like your schooling, right, your background and your educational history, I want to go back even further. So let's kind of go back in the beginning. You grew up somewhere. So where are you originally from?
Yeah, I'm originally from Mustang, Oklahoma.
All
So,
right.
yeah,
Mustang.
can't get more Oklahoma than that.
Yeah, okay. And so you obviously have this passion for aerospace and aviation, and you said mechanical engineering. Did that start when you were a child? Like, was there something that like you looked around and said, I want to do that when I grow up?
No, no, it was actually really interesting for me. I initially got interested in geology, and through the study of geology when I was in middle school and in high school, I became really interested in basically astrophysics. How planets formed and then how stars formed and galactic formation, and really starting to think about bigger pictures. And so as an undergraduate, I really wanted to have a career in developing telescopes to help study the stars from space. And so I was going through a double major program that I was trying to create myself through astrophysics and aerospace engineering. And people would ask me, well, what do you want to do? I said, well, I want to build satellites like the Kepler, the James Webb telescope that we have now. And at some point, I think I was a sophomore when the registrar came to me finally and said, well, you can't do both astrophysics and aerospace engineering. You have to pick one. And I had scholarships in both, but the aerospace engineering one was a better scholarship. So I said, okay, I'll go with that. And then I just minored in, these astrophysics classes through the rest of my undergraduate career. But it wasn't until I was a senior that I took a laboratory that, had me work in a wind tunnel. And that's when kind of everything clicked for me. And I was like, oh, this is what I'm passionate about, what I really like doing. It was aerodynamics and aircraft design. And so I kind of changed, my career plans at that point because I found the thing that I really, really loved. I'm still very passionate about space, and I can bring that back to the classroom. So I get to enjoy that part of the passion, but do the stuff that I really enjoy on a daily basis as well.
Isn't it so interesting, Jamey, how like some bureaucratic comment or decision can completely change the direction of like your trajectory? Like, no,
Yes.
you can't do two majors. It's like, why not? Like
Yeah,
that
why
seems to
not?
me
Right, right.
right. I don't understand that, but it's okay. I mean, everything happens for a reason. By the way, that's something my mom would always say to me. That's like a saying that's stuck in my mind. Are there any kind of sayings like from your parents or teachers or growing up that like stick in your mind even today that you kind of embrace in a part of your philosophy, especially about giving opportunities to others?
Well, and I'm not sure if this one is fits within the theme necessarily, but yeah, I think you can take it for what it's worth. And I had asked, kind of later in my graduate career, before I'd finished my PhD, I had the opportunity to meet with a very, very well known professor in my field from Caltech. His name was Hans Liebman, and he was a National Academy member, very well regarded. Had done a number of great discoveries in his career. And of course, he was, way past retirement at this age. And I asked him, I said, well, what advice could you give me? And at that time, again, I was thinking about going into the academic career. And he said, use your unfair advantages. And I always, when he first told me that, I thought, well, yeah, that's not very inspirational. Um, but it's one of those that I've found, in my career, is really useful, to be successful. I tend to be very idealistic and optimistic, and as you kind of go into your career, you think, oh, it's always just about being, putting in the best proposal or putting in the best offer. But it's kind of those unfair advantages that you have to take advantage of, not necessarily in a bad way, but that really help you do something that other people can't necessarily do. And I almost kind of relate this to athletics. The really good athletes are naturally born with, kind of a distinct advantage in terms of specific talents that they have. They have to nurture those. They have to train, and they have to take, a lot of hard work to be able to make use out of those. But every person's very similar to that. Everyone has kind of those built-in unfair advantages, and try to utilize those as best you can. So again, I don't necessarily think it's very inspirational, but I have found it really, really useful in my career.
Well, you said a lot there. And honestly, most podcasts that I do, this leadership podcast, I ask people nature versus nurture. And you kind of answered that already because I agree with you, honestly, that I think people are born with certain talents, including leadership abilities. And then, their environment either nurtures them or not to develop those. But, this whole unfair advantages, you know, when I think about that, I think talents, as you mentioned, but I also think externally opportunities, which is a word you picked as part of your theme,
Hmm.
because there are going to be opportunities that come your way for whatever reason. And if you leverage them, you take advantage of them, then you will succeed. So I think it actually does dovetail into your theme. And
It
although
does,
unfair
yeah.
advantages is like a weird way to say it, it makes a lot of sense that everybody has innate abilities and talents and absolutely use them. And I love how you focus on that for your students, leveraging their passion, their interest to find unique opportunities for them. So I know we have a whole bunch of really cool pictures. I want to kind of start that show and tell. And this is like a really unique show because what Jamey has provided us is a lot of images of him with students and some of these projects that really ties into his theme of leading by creating opportunities for others. And so let's go ahead and roll this first picture. I think it might be an anti-gravity one. So tell us, what are we looking at here?
Yeah, yeah. And this was a program that we created here when I first joined OSU called Space Cowboys. And the idea behind this was taking advantage of a NASA program called Microgravity University, which, NASA had generated this to really take advantage of student ideas. NASA has a lot of problems they want to solve. They don't have, enough resources to be able to solve everything. So they put some of these ideas out and said, hey, let's, let those smart kids that don't know what they don't know yet, right? That haven't been in a career long enough to say, oh, you can't do it that way, to
Right.
come up with some really unique ideas. And this was about, those students learning to write proposals, getting them critically evaluated by a NASA team, and if they're selected, they get to go on fly in what NASA calls the weightless wonder, what everyone else calls the vomit comet, where you get to spend some time in microgravity. And so I got the opportunity to participate with one of the teams in evaluating, the impact of microgravity on motion capture systems to be able to design spacesuits. And so it was a really great opportunity, and that's been an experience I can take back to the students now and talk to them about what it's like to to be in a microgravity environment. And now we teach a course on that called Living in Space.
Now, were you a student in that picture, or were you a professor there?
Yeah, I was actually a young professor there. So yeah, I was
Okay.
still, yeah. And so I had a group of students that came with me. One of those who is now herself a professor after going through that experience.
Wow, you should be, I'm sure you're very proud of that. That's really cool. And what I think is really important too is the practical information you're giving people, like how to write an RFP. I mean, to be
Right.
in
Yeah.
college or graduate school and have the opportunity to actually write a request for proposal that goes to NASA and frankly gets approved, that is significant.
Yeah.
So I think we have another cool picture here. So let's go ahead and roll that one. What is this thing?
Yeah, yeah. So this is really interesting. It looks like we're in some kind of a fun house, but this is
Yeah.
actually a balloon that our students have constructed for another NASA slash Sandia National Labs project. And so we're in a giant balloon, which is quite literally made from painter's tarp that you buy from Lowe's or Home Depot from just a hardware store and construct that balloon out of. And it's just a lot of this material taped together. And these systems are actually being evaluated to test sensors which would eventually fly on Venus. So this particular NASA JPL project again is harnessing a lot of energy and passion from these young students that you see here. One of them now is a mission director at NASA, kind of building off on a lot of these experiences that she learned here, to do something really neat, right, and novel. Take these balloons out. These are actually called solar balloons. They fly from just the buoyant lift that they get from the heating of the sun, and then fly up to 80,000 feet. And then you go out and recover them and take the data that they've acquired off of the sensors.
Wow, that's amazing. I want to, before we get to another picture, I want to make sure we're talking about Oklahoma State's Unmanned Research Institute that you direct, that you lead. Are these projects that we're talking about all part of USRI?
They are, and in particular, you think about unmanned systems. You think, oh, flying drones, like little multi-rotors, but it's really anything that flies in the air. So it doesn't matter if it's an aircraft or a rotorcraft or a balloon. Those all encompass the same type of technology. And one thing that we try to do at USRI is really expand the scope, right, and not just think about these things as small drones that you could buy off the shelf. It's thinking about unique systems that you need to be able to design to really get the data that you're after. At the end of the day, it's all about the data. It's not about the mechanism to get it. It's about the science.
Yes, absolutely. I'm laughing because we talk about this on all of our podcasts, especially in the drone world. You're right. It's a tool. There's so many different technologies that contribute to the ecosystem. At the end of the day, it's all about the data and then the analysis of that data, right, to make it actionable, to do something, whatever that thing happens to be. So, Super, super cool. How long has the Research Institute been around?
Yeah, we formed it in 2015. We've been doing work like this for, about 2 decades, and we finally decided really to establish this based upon all the requests that we were getting from other researchers across campus and from across the state. Saying, oh, usually the question would be, I bought a drone. Now what do I do? As
Right.
opposed to, well, let's step back a bit and say, well, what do you want first? What kind of data are you trying to get? And then determine, well, is a drone the best option? And, I often tell people sometimes a camera on a stick is going to be better than, using a drone for what you need to get. But then once you make that determination, what are you trying to measure? How are you trying to measure it? What's the operational requirements that you have, and really think about the problem holistically. And it's been, very well received since we founded that, 7 years ago now.
Yeah, so clearly you're doing amazing things there. So we have another picture here we're going to show. Is this a drone?
It is a drone, and so that's one of our students at the time. He's now a research faculty here at OSU with the Unmanned Systems Research Institute. So Ben Lowe designed this, based around some additional concepts. And this particular request came from firefighters that were part of the rescue effort at the Murrow building bombing back in 1995.
Oh my gosh,
This was a
Oklahoma. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, this was a horrendous disaster. Many people lost their lives, but the first responders didn't have a good way to get in. This was a high rise with a huge chunk just taken out of one side with concrete and wires and rebar, and there was not a good way to go in and try to find victims to rescue them. And so the basic concept was we need something that's robust that can operate land, not on a smooth surface, be able to communicate with the victim, through either, a two-way radio or video, and then be able to take off again and go to a new location. So Ben had developed this concept as part of one of our graduate classes here. This system was able to come in, land, roll around using the propulsion system to actually roll on the ground and then take off again and upright itself. And so this device called Atlas for all-terrain land and air sphere was designed really in response to one of those requests from a first responder.
Oh my gosh. Has this been commercialized?
He's actually in the process of that, and so it's done a lot of field testing with both fire departments and police departments.
The reason why I ask is because I just saw Brink drones. First of all, they're creating a lot of different, very specialized drones for SWAT teams.
Hmm.
Origin story similar insofar as another horrible disaster. In this case, for them, it was Las Vegas and the horrific shooting.
Yeah.
And then law enforcement coming to them like, hey, if we had a drone, we might have been able to save more lives here. Could have flown up to the building, maybe busted down a door or something, knocked in a window. And so that's what they've been focused on. But I mentioned them because they just created a little ball that is not a drone, but they roll in and can communicate with
Right.
victims or people like that. So this ball/drone concept in one, I think is really cool. I love what you're doing already. I'm so excited about it myself. So really phenomenal.
Well, I think
Um,
this goes back to the opportunity we were mentioning earlier. We
yeah,
used both the opportunity from the mission request, but also this as part of a course to be able to create a really unique product, using the creativity of some of the students.
yeah, absolutely. And doing things with societal good beyond just, hey, this is a really cool gadget that I created. The Venus thing was it Venus or Mars? You
It
said
was
Venus.
Venus.
It
Yeah,
was
yeah.
Venus.
Mhm.
It was one of those distant planets. That's interesting, but it's so like far removed, right, from our normal reality.
Mhm.
Something like this, I think, is really could be really impactful for people on a daily basis. Um,
Yeah, you mentioned Venus, and if I can, I actually got my start back in UAVs when I was in the University of Kentucky on working on NASA projects to develop UAVs for Mars. And this was back in the early 2000s, and it took 20 years, right, 2 decades,
Right.
for the decade to evolve to the point where now we actually have a flying drone, right, a drone operating on another planet now. And so,
Yes.
it's just
And
amazing to see that what the technology can do.
absolutely. And that was within that was last year, right?
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So just right how long that took. So we have another photo we'd like to roll here. Now
Oh, yeah, this is
explain,
great.
Jamie, tell them who this person is that's standing next to you.
Yeah, so this is Wally Funk, one of the original Mercury 13. So this was, part of the NASA's early attempt, to develop a female astronaut corps. Unfortunately, they ended up veering away from that.
Ah,
But they were, all those young women at the time went on to have great careers. Wally was one of those, and she was also an OSU graduate. And so she was coming back after her flight on the Blue Origin, which at the time, she was the oldest person to fly, past that edge of space on the Blue Origin spacecraft. And she
wow.
came back, and we were really excited about this because this was her first drone flight. She had never operated a
Really?
drone before, and so we got to, teach her how to fly. She's obviously a great pilot. That's what she's well known for. And we were able to have her take this next adventure and be able to go fly a drone. And she was so enthusiastic and excited about this. You could just tell on her face, she was just having the time of her life.
I could see the joy, and I'm just curious since we're talking about creating opportunities for people, this is a cool opportunity for her. Did any of your students have a chance to engage with her? Because clearly a pioneer and so inspirational, especially for perhaps the young women in particular in your
It,
organization.
it, it was. I wish I had that other picture available where we had all the females in our lab group there, able to talk to her about her experiences. And again, very inspirational for them, to be able to see someone, of her stature with all the stuff that she's done in her career, but also still be so passionate about it. And so, being able to inspire the next generation,
That
these
is
women to go into the aerospace industry.
that is amazing. Just curious, as long as you've been teaching, have you seen a change in the complexion of your student body from a diversity standpoint?
Yes, I would say not enough. I mean, we still have a
Mm,
lot of work to do. There is still a little bit, certainly of that mentality of, science being a boys' game. But yeah, we have so many, passionate young women in the program, that have grown up with the technology. And I really think that is what we're really driving the change that's going to help push this forward. Is they're being integrated with the technology from now birth on.
yeah,
Where you and I of our age, we're really these digital immigrants who came into it,
right.
whether it was our teen years or 20s or whatever, where they're now being immersed in it, and they say it gives them a different perspective, and they don't really think about the barriers and necessarily saying, oh, this is just for nerds or just for guys to do.
Right.
It's like it's cool, right? It's okay to
Yeah.
do this type of stuff now. On the other side, one of the areas that we've been really focused on is the tribal entities and Native American inclusion within the state, because we have such a large population here
Yes.
that really don't have a lot of these opportunities within the tribal boundaries.
Right.
And bringing them here to OSU to be able to give them an experience and try to reach them at a young age, because once
Yes.
you see it, you have to be able to really get them early on, whether it's elementary or middle school, to get them excited about it.
No, that is so great. And it really perfectly dovetails, I think, with your theme, this idea of leading, through opportunities, giving people opportunities. I work a lot with a group called Women in Drones, and Sharon Rossmark is the CEO, and
It's a
she
great
says this.
program.
Yeah, it is. She says all the time, if you see me, you can be me. And, I never really thought, Jamie, about, we always talk about, oh, get a drone in every classroom, it almost sounds like you're like, get a drone in every cradle, like get them at
Yeah,
birth.
I like that. I'm
So
going to steal that.
there you
So,
go. Like, a chicken in every pot, a drone in every cradle.
uh,
So that's amazing. But agree, like opening people's eyes, giving them these chances, these opportunities that you've continued to do, I think is really just great. I think we have one last photo of you. I think it's in front of, here we go. That looks like a fighter jet.
Yeah, not quite. So this is the
Okay.
NASA scientific aircraft, the XB-57.
Okay.
Yeah, which is
Whoa.
a high altitude aircraft. Is the pilots have to be suited up and wear an astronaut suit, flight
Like
suit.
in Top
During
Gun
operation.
Maverick, spoiler alert if you haven't seen the
Exactly,
movie.
right, right.
Yeah.
Wouldn't go quite Mach 10 in this
Okay,
case.
gotcha.
But again, this was a unique opportunity for our students to be able to develop a payload and put on board this aircraft to fly at high altitudes to be able to evaluate some of the technology that we're testing on drones. So one of the things that we use quite a bit going back to those early days of developing tornado chaser drones is using drones for weather forecasting, that we can improve our understanding of the atmosphere and the weather by using drones to provide a bit more data. That data then goes into the forecast and we get a better forecast out of it. And taking those same sensors and flying them up to high altitude now. Um,
I'm smiling, Jamie, because have you met Don Bershoff from True Weather Solutions? Because
Don and I are very, very good friends.
okay, you are speaking his language,
Yes, I
and
am. Yeah, we are on the same page. So
uh,
he and I
that's
preach out of the same book.
all right. Very, very cool. Well, now that I see the full picture, I can tell that's not a fighter jet. But man, so how high up does this thing fly?
Oh, this was, I think we were flying at 70,000 feet, thereabouts, just a little shy of that. I think we're at 66 when we were operating.
And these
So
are
yeah,
weather.
quite high for an aircraft.
That is quite high for an aircraft, and these are weather sensors you're having on board.
Yeah, so very precise sensors, to be able to really calibrate them for these high altitudes. Because one of the things when we're flying things on balloons, for example, there's not always a guarantee that we're going to get those sensors back or get them in the condition that we'd like to see them. So
Oh,
again, this
true.
was an opportunity for the students, not only work with an aircraft that I never get this close to. I'd seen this aircraft in the Ellington Air Force Base hangar for years, and NASA would always be like, "Don't look at that. Don't look over there. Pretend the aircraft doesn't exist." And then this
Well, you
program
can look,
came
but
up.
then we'll have to kill you or something.
Exactly,
Yeah.
right. And they're like,
Yeah.
"Okay, come on over. Now you can put your payload in this aircraft." And
Yeah.
and so, I have to say it wasn't just a great opportunity for the students. It was also a really exciting opportunity for me as well to be able to do this.
Well, I find that servant leaders such as yourself, when you give to others, you often, indirectly receive, and it's pretty rewarding, honestly. I think that's probably universally true, and why we keep doing it, right? People like you keep doing it.
Yeah.
Um, so, all right, let's kind of get brass tacks because we've got a lot of people out there watching this show. They want leadership tips. You're clearly be able to see a vision, create opportunities for your students as a practical matter. How are you doing that? Like, in other words, let's just take it out of the university setting, although university setting is very unique, right? How
Mhm.
are you able to find these like grant opportunities, or as you said, very at the beginning, towards the beginning of the show, RFPs from NASA? Like, where do people go to find these things to have these opportunities? Where do they even look?
Well, yeah, I guess my answer, my standard answer, and I always tell the students that this is a safe answer to almost any question, is it depends, right? So it depends upon
Right.
the agency that you're looking at. And really,
True.
at first, it's about building some of those relationships. And if you're working with DoD or NASA, it's very different than if, say you're, putting in a proposal at the National Science Foundation, which tends to be a little more, hey, come up with some idea and we'll evaluate it. We're on the more pragmatic agencies that are not as interested in the fundamental science, but they're interested in the results on the DoD and NASA side. It's about, hey, well, what kind of relationship can we build? And I think this goes back, a little bit to the unfair advantages piece. I'm not the smartest, engineer in the room, but one of the things I do really well is build relationships between different teams. And that's what I like to do is, get a group of people together that have diverse perspectives and ways of thinking. They're not all, engineers or scientists of the same stripe or same background, and get them together in a room to be able to solve a problem and say, hey, here's what we want to do. How do we get to that point to do that? And look for those unique opportunities where you come across that that new scientist or engineer that you meet at a conference, and you start talking and say, hey, yeah, there's something here that we can do together. Like, Don is a great example of that.
He really is. He's a great collaborator too. So was there something, we talked about like maybe a pivotal moment, and it sounded like you had this epiphany pretty early in your career with the wind tunnel where you're like, this is what I want to do. Uh, were there any other like pivotal moments along the way that you can point to and say, this really kind of impacted how I view creating opportunities for others?
Well, yeah, and I think again it comes back to my interests now. I'm flying drones in the atmosphere for weather measurements, and being from Oklahoma, we're all very tend to be very interested in the weather, and being passionate about these really amazing natural phenomena, supercells and tornadoes and thunderstorms, which are can be very awe-inspiring, or
Yeah.
also very terrifying, depending upon
Yes,
how you look at it.
for sure.
And it took 30 years for my career to finally be able to come back and marry all these things together. Where now I have aeronautics and robotics and atmospheric science, and then being able to at least touch a little bit of that extraterrestrial piece, but from my early passion, which was the space side, which is, hey, now we can develop these systems to help fly on other planets. Even though one of our systems may never fly on Mars or Venus, we're all helping push the ball down the field just a little bit at a time, and push
Well,
that
you're
technology forward.
you're creating opportunities by connecting dots, and that's pretty visionary. So I don't want to wait till the end to ask you this. We talked about Don Bershoff. Clearly, you've talked to him. You're maybe working with him in some regard. How do people plug into your students aside, right? They can apply to OSU and become part of your research institute, but how can companies or other people collaborate with what you and what you're doing, creating
Yeah, yeah.
opportunities?
Yeah, and actually, we started this interview a little bit late because it was my fault because I was coming from our flight testing field. We were actually working with two companies out there that were doing flight tests simultaneously. And for us, it's really about providing resources and capabilities. Again, opportunity. One of the things that universities provide is research and development capabilities and resources that companies may not be able to invest in, particularly smaller companies. But one of these companies is a small entrepreneurial startup. The other is a Fortune 500 company.
Wow.
But they're both coming to us, for the same resources in terms of, hey, we need your expertise. But what do? We use that as an opportunity, and we have lots of students out there to be able to get this experience. And one of them was just telling me that he had an interview this morning, and he's saying, "Oh, they were asking me if I'm, have some international work experience, and here I am working, with a company from outside the U.S. That has a global reach." And so, again, providing those unique experiences that they may not otherwise be able to see.
Yeah, Oklahoma, I'm sure you know this because North Dakota was gnashing their teeth, came out #1 on that list from the Mercatix Center as the most drone-friendly state this past year. So I know people that I think people knew the Choctaw Nation was out there doing things, right, with the Integration Pilot Program, Beyond program, but I don't know that they knew holistically what Oklahoma was doing, including you and your research center. So I love shining a light on some of this work that you're doing, Jamey, because I think it's really, really important. But let's talk about balance because we can't end this show without talking about that. I think this is a leadership show, and you're very successful in what you do and creating opportunities for others. How do you create balance in your own life as you're, like you said, running from out in the field to this podcast to, I'm sure, certain other things oftentimes in your life? How do you maintain that balance?
Yeah, that's an awful question because my answer
Awful.
is yeah.
Yeah, it is. I know.
I do it very poorly. And again, I think that goes back to when I try to take advantage of the things that I'm good at, it's being very tenacious and stubborn. And as my wife always tells me, I need to do a much better job of learning how to say no. But it's a passion, thing that you're excited about stuff, and that's at the end of the day, that's what keeps you going. Doing what you love.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and it sounds like, well, you said you had a wife, so it sounds like she's super supportive to let you do all of these things, so that's pretty great. And
Yeah,
you can't,
yes, she puts up with me more than she should. So let's put it
uh,
that way.
well, clearly, she loves you, and that's why she does it. So I know for myself, I couldn't do what I do without the support of my husband, and my family, because it's been a crazy wild career, and then jumping into entrepreneurship on top of that for sure. So let's talk about leading others, because we've talked about your leadership and how you create opportunities. Um, what would you say is the most challenging thing leading students, maybe these cross-disciplinary groups that you're talking about on some of these projects? What's the most challenging thing in leading these kind of groups as you're trying to create some opportunities for them?
Well, sure. I think it's different perspectives, diverse backgrounds, diverse opinions, diverse personalities. Managing that is obviously very difficult. From a professor to student perspective, I don't like to be a micromanager. I like to provide resources and inspire the students, give them the opportunities and let them go and see what they can do. And provide those course corrections, and be able to say, well, maybe we should try this instead of trying that. I'm a strong believer in learning from failure. A negative result is still a result. When you're running experiments, just because the answer didn't come out to be the way you thought it was going to be, that's okay. That's still part of the scientific process. And in those long-term discoveries, those aha moments are the ones that are much more, have long-term implications much more than those eureka moments do. So certainly that's okay to figure those out on the way. The scientific journey isn't a straight line from point A to point B. It's very circuitous, and you have lots of dead ends, and times you have to turn back around, and you just have to be persistent and stick with it.
I hope people are listening carefully, and I hope there are students out there, because you are dropping a lot of wisdom right now about not only just science and research, but life in general, honestly, because all of this applies there too. I'm going to flip that question on its head and say, what is the most rewarding thing for you, creating opportunities as a leader?
Yeah, I think it's really working with the students, and seeing those students get excited about it, because
Yeah.
to see someone get their dream job at NASA, or be able to fly something that they built themselves for the first time. That's great. Being able to see that, those spark in their eyes. And doing this, providing those opportunities. We talked earlier about the outreach piece. We're in such a great time right now in terms of the technology, and there's nothing really more inspiring than being able to take computers and robots and aircraft, and fold them all together into this thing called a drone. And working with groups, like the Choctaw Nation, with James Grimsley and everything that he's been doing with them down there, is having those relationships and then providing, getting those opportunities that come out of those to be able to interact, with the young people of the world, and open up their eyes to new possibilities that they maybe not have thought about before.
Yeah, that is great. We are going to go to our lightning round, Jamie, now. Three quick questions, quick
Oh
answers,
no,
all
okay,
right?
all right.
So, all right, grab your seat. Here we go. So, number one, what is one of your favorite books?
God, one of my favorite books is City by Clifford D. Simak, and it's probably not one of those that many people have heard of or read, but it's one of those that spans a really what I like to call deep history, very very long time scales that most people don't think of.
Okay, interesting one. Haven't heard of that one. So, number two, who's your hero and why?
I'm going to pick. I have a lot of heroes. I'll pick out one that I go back to time again. Carl Sagan.
There you go. And number 3, you've been dropping leadership tips all along the way today, but I'm still going to ask it anyway. What's one leadership tip you learned along the way that you would love to pass along to others?
Oh gosh, that's you. I'm going to fail this lightning round. It's okay.
I'm sorry, you're doing good. You're doing very well.
Yeah. So failure is sometimes an option. That's okay. You don't have to be successful at everything. Sometimes it's okay to say, no, this wasn't for me, and use that to, veer, your day, your week, your career in a different direction. That's all right. Learn from your failures, and move on.
Yeah, it's an unfair advantage to also figure out what you're good and what you may not be good at, and that's okay. I really feel like, especially in the day of COVID, these kids, the way they grew up and so many of these classes being online, like they just need to know that, like, that is okay. It is okay to fail. It's actually failing forward is a beautiful thing in life.
We like to say fail faster.
Yeah. That's perfect. That's perfect. All right. So we are getting close to our end of our time together. What I want to make sure people know how to connect with you, Jamey, and how they can find out more about OSU's Unmanned Systems Research Institute, USRI.
Yeah, it's actually pretty easy. You can Google USRI, OK State. You'll find us online. We're on Facebook a lot. We like to post, all of our videos and great stuff that our students are doing. So that's always a good resource to find us, or just Google my name, and my email address is out there, and you can always drop me a line.
And this applies not only to students, other professors that are interested, but also to the drone industry and kind of the larger technology ecosystem, folks that want to test things, they want to try things out, they want to collaborate with students and professors on some concept. That's you, right?
It is, but we all have a great team. It's not just me. We have faculty, students, research engineers, research faculty, lots of great people, to make everything happen. So I'm just here to connect dots.
All right. Well, you've been connecting them, and you connected some for us here today. So thank you so much for taking this time. It was really great to talk to you about leading through opportunity today. It was a really great show. So thank you so much, Jamey.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Got it. We're out here.